Hello and welcome to Cloud Forest Vibes. My name's Bobby, and this is how I grow orchids and carnivorous plants. Hello and welcome to Cloud Forest Vibes. So today we're going to do a video that I've actually put off for a little while. I don't know why, but we're going to talk about Phalaenopsis orchids. We're going to do a little bit of a tour, and we're going to have a chat about care and culture, how I grow them in my environment, and my successes, my failures, so on and so forth. Phalaenopsis are the most popular orchid, no doubt, hands down, probably worldwide, and I wouldn't be doing any justice to anybody if I didn't talk about those orchids. So I have them pulled out on my rack. I'm going to go ahead and get the camera moved around and set up over there. We'll take a look at some blooms, some spikes, and plants in general, and we're going to talk about differences between miniatures and standards, and between the hybrids and between the complex hybrids, the novelty hybrids, and some of the species. So here we go. So here we are. I've got all my Phalaenopsis orchids splayed out right here on my watering station. But I figured we'd go ahead and take a look at the ones we have in bloom first. I have this lovely white mini phal, and both of these, purple with white and then white with purple mini phals, they probably have some sort of a species name or clonal name, but I just do not know what that is. So those are my three I have in bloom. I do have a Phalaena that has a spike on it right here, but that is all we have to talk about as far as that goes. So these are still opening up. This is its second round of blooms. This spike produced a lovely flush of blooms earlier in the year. I'll throw a picture up of that. But it has 6 more to come, and I'm just thrilled. This here is also just opening. This was an extension of a branch. We're fading on some of the older flowers, but it does seem like it's going to keep going for just a little while longer, and I am going to let it go. And this one, not much longer for this world, but I will cut this spike off and let some strength get back into this plant. The plant is actually 2 plants. The keiki that grew off the base of this plant is actually the one that's flowering. This plant got crown rot, and I somehow saved it, and it started to push out a new plantlet from the side, which is now about a year in, and it is to the size of where it's starting to produce its own flowers now. So I'm going to get the tripod out so we can easier look at and discuss these plants. Alright, so I've kind of got these plants divided up by section, and we'll go over that now. This and all these up here are hybrid Phalaenopsis, complex hybrids. Some of them are miniatures, like these 3, 4. And then I have 1 standard phal left because they just take up so much darn room. I had to get rid of them all. This is a Baldon's kaleidoscope, I believe. It's the yellow with pink veining. It's really, really pretty. I did not let it bloom this year. It produced a really malformed spike, and I repotted it, and I'm just letting it get strength back into itself, which it seems like it's doing with this really awesome new leaf that it's pushing out. These right here are both Phalaenas. Again, I have this, which came in the pot with this, and I separated it out and gave it its own mount. I'll probably give that away one day to somebody, but for now I'm growing it on, pushing it on. So these are my only novelty Phalaenopsis, I guess I should say. And then this is a Phalaenopsis celebensis, and this is a Phalaenopsis parishii. These are my 2 species. The first thing you'll probably notice outright is the Phalaenopsis species that I have are much, much, much smaller than even your miniature Phalaenopsis. A lot of phal species are like that. There are larger plants, but a lot of the species that you'll find are not quite as big as, say, this guy right here. Not even anywhere close. Your standard phal, your novelty phals stick to be usually around this size. They can get bigger. I've seen them grow differently for different people, but they're not usually quite as big as the monsters. And then your miniature phals go from very, very small all the way to a pretty decent sized miniature. Care for these plants, honestly, they get cared for just about the same. I do keep these in pots. They've just been in there forever. This was the first complex hybrid Phalaenopsis that I mounted, and it seems to be doing well. It's producing a new leaf, it's got new roots coming, but for whatever reason in my environment, so far they've seemed to really like being in the pots, though I like them better growing on a mount. I'm just running out of mounted space. The standard phal I also grow potted. The media that I use, it's a mix of large bark, medium bark, sphagnum moss, the zombie moss, perlite, and then I throw a little bit of crushed oyster shell in just so it has an added boost of calcium and to help keep the sphagnum moss from getting too acidic, because they do tend to stay in their pots for quite a long time, 2 years, 2 seasons. I water them in pots about once a week, once every 5 days when it's hot, whenever I notice that the roots in the pots have gone white and they do need another drink. They're very heavy feeders, all of them. I feed them at the highest ppm of any plants any plants that I grow, them and the Vandaceous types. It's usually about 270 to 300 parts per million, and I do feed them a mix. Whenever they're growing, they get plenty of calcium nitrate added into their MSU feed. In the fall, I switch these over to Jack's feed mixed with calcium nitrate, and then I slowly taper the calcium nitrate off, and I boost it up with calcium and magnesium, CalMag, after they're no longer growing as fast in the cooler months in the wintertime. So that's it. I do not let these plants get too cool. They do grow in my big greenhouse, so they get down to high 50s, low 60s, about 58 degrees. In the winter, they do slow right down. In fact, this Bellina here threw out this spike in the fall, and once it got cooler, it promptly stalled, and it has not done jack since. So they really, really do not like cool temps. As for the ones that you see growing mounted, I water them quite a bit more frequently. They do get watered several times a week. I let the moss dry between waterings, and then they go ahead and get watered again. I feed them almost constantly. I flush them a lot as well. They get calcium nitrate, they get calcium and magnesium, they get kelp, everything that my other orchids get. These guys just get a little bit more frequently. Another thing that I do like to do is I use Espoma organic garden lime, and I'll sprinkle it in the pots. I'll sprinkle it on the mounts and soak it in with the sprayer, and they really do, again, love, absolutely love the extra magnesium and the extra calcium that they get from that. I do get leaves that drop, but you'll notice I don't have a whole bunch of senescence going on. A whole bunch of the older leaves are still on the plants, and that is a big win for me, because when I first started, I did have issues. Until I started using the garden lime and adding calcium nitrate in with their feeds, I really, really did have issues there. Whenever I water them with straight water, they almost always get CalMag in that water, or kelp a little bit. And again, I can't stress to you enough, they are hungry, hungry plants. So that's the main difference between growing them potted and mounted. Let's talk about the different types. The miniature complex phals, they tend to like a little bit more light than your standard large phals. You'll notice the leaves are a brighter color green, a lighter color, because they are higher up on the shelf, as are the species. This has dark green leaves. It is in one of the shadier parts of my greenhouse, along with this guy actually, and you can really tell the difference between, let's grab this one. Oh, let's not, and say we did. You can really see the difference in the leaf color between the ones that are on the top shelf and the ones that are lower down. Now, having that said, the miniature phals, in my experience, don't fall over. The miniature phals and the species like to grow a little bit more moist than the standard phals and some of these. I do treat these more or less like I do the species, but I do not let them dry out as hard as I would, say, the standard or the miniatures. The mounted ones do stay a lot more moist most of the time than the ones in the pot, but the pot does retain moisture better, so I think there is a balance there. I like the way they look on the mounts because they cascade down. It protects the crown. This is a great example of it. This, being that it doesn't grow sitting upright, it grows like this. It is almost impossible to get water in that crown. it protects the orchid. It really does. That's how they want to grow. That's how they like to grow. Even in the pots, they droop over, they hang over and grow pendulously over time because that's what they really want. I mentioned earlier with this plant here, this guy, that I had a situation where I got water down in the crown. A lot of us have done that, and it created crown rot. I had to rip out the leaf. I ripped out the next leaf down. I packed the wound with cinnamon, and I put it in front of a fan for a couple days, and it did save the plant. It struggled. It took about 6 months, and it finally produced a little shoot from the side, and it has turned into this division on this side that's actually blooming. So you can save a plant from crown rot. Under the right circumstances, it will push on, it will clone itself, but it's better to not deal with that to begin with. So all the phals I get from a certain point on in my collecting, this one was the start, all of them got mounted. All the species that I've ever gotten get mounted immediately. And the novelty phals, they grew in a pot for a while. They were doing okay. I grew them with my mini phals, but now that I've grown them mounted, they've really perked up, and they really started to act a whole lot better and happier for me since then. So I think the proof is in the pudding. My humidity is very high, and now that I've got them on mounts, I can also put them in different locations than just one shelf, two shelf, and I have a lot more flexibility and options on the type of light that they get and how they get airflow and whatnot as well. So that's about it. Phalaenopsis is a really easy genus to grow. Even the species, they can be fussier, but again, there's a huge range of them from cold gloving all the way up to really hot growing. And I truly believe that there's a right Phalaenopsis for everybody if you're into those kind of orchids. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to shuttle these guys back in there, and we're going to go ahead and take a closer look at them in the grow environment, and we'll have a little bit more in-depth chat about why I keep them in the different locations I do. So we're back in the tent. I've got everything in here. It's a different angle. I usually shoot from over on this side, so this is what it looks like looking in from the door this way. This is where I keep all my Phalaenopsis orchids. I keep them across from the window, but they do have a lot of stuff in the way, like this Spanish moss. Normally my giant Nepenthes plant hangs right here. They've got the Maxillaria over here. They've got a lot of things that help, diffuse the light as it passes from the window over to where they sit. They do also get bright light from the lights above, and they don't seem to mind the artificial light, especially being that the humidity in here is so high. So you see, this is how they grow. They present themselves nicely over to the light. The hanging ones are behind my mini phals up here on the top shelf, next to some dendrobiums, and this is the Thrixspermum and other things that like to get some bright light but not necessarily the full sun. And as you go down, I've got another species here. This is the Parishii, and all the way deep down in the corner lives my standard phal and the one mini one that I mounted and just didn't have room for up there. So that is where they live. That is how they grow. And again, they are really easy growing orchids. They're really fun to grow, very rewarding. Again, they bloom all the time, beautiful flowers. And yeah, you guys, if you haven't already got one, which I'm sure is ludicrous to say, but if you don't have Phalaenopsis orchids already, you definitely need to get them. So that is how I grow them. I hope you enjoyed. I hope I was able to shed light on some things and show you guys a different way to grow phals. Like I said, I really like to grow everything mounted that I possibly can. And I think that these, once I do repot them, see how they have all these aerial roots and everything going crazy everywhere? I think they're all going to end up being on a mount before too long. We'll see. But anyway, thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. And I hope you enjoyed my little Phalaenopsis tour and my care tips for them. So until next time, thank you again, and happy growing.